David, we're going to be talking today about what perhaps is one of the most remarkable breakthroughs you've come upon. How are you, David?
I'm very well, Jason. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you. People who've been watching us each week are going to be aware that we've got a show that we do on Patreon and Subscribestar. It's David Hawkins Reverse CSI. It's coming up at 1:30 today, David. And one of the topics that you and I have explored quite extensively is this issue with the Boeing 737 MAX 8. And it came back to my attention earlier this week. There was an announcement that Boeing halting production of the MAX 8 is going to actually have a direct impact on the United States gross domestic product. I was pretty surprised because obviously Boeing is a huge company, but the United States is huge, and to have a 0.5% impact on the GDP seems astounding to me. What do you think about this?
Well, it's absolutely true, and I also believe that they have a long-term plan to destroy Boeing, and that plan was put in place, years ago, and we can cover that in a minute. But the MAX 8 aircraft, it is extraordinary. When I was working with Schlumberger, I was employed out of Paris as a troubleshooter, so I would go to the field, and if there was equipment failure, I'd try and investigate that, come back to development engineering, research engineering. I got very familiar with going around the kind of loop that I would assume, and I hope that there are people in Boeing doing exactly the same thing. That is liaising between production and the field and the experience of the clients, et cetera, et cetera. This is a catastrophic blow for Boeing, and people should understand that it's very possible there's a long-term agenda to destroy Boeing. Over to you.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting, David, in the image for today, the photo collage, if you will, we've included an overlay of a patent that you've been speaking to us about for basically as long as I've known you. This is the QinetiQ North America Social Engineering Protection Appliance. Do you want to give people a quick overview of what that is, if we've got some new viewers who perhaps haven't seen us before?
Well, absolutely. It's a program that looks at emails and other kinds of communication, semantic, non-semantic, verbal, etc., and tries to determine whether the source of those emails is from a malicious party or a friendly party. And then it sorts them, I would claim very arrogantly, into that which is deemed to be malicious, and it's parked in a way that causes the least damage to the internal communications of the system. And my point is, well, by whose standard is it deemed to be malicious?
Right.
And I think what's happened with QinetiQ, unfortunately, it's been infiltrated by social engineers who are malicious. And the code that has been developed by QinetiQ is being used by the social engineers to exclude people like you and me. Over to you.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting to me, David, is that you introduced me to this process that, as far as I'm aware, you developed. You basically search the patent office for unique patents, and you read through their very descriptive abstract language, and you identify technologies that have unique capabilities, and you associate these technologies with these signatures of technological mishaps related to unsolved crimes. Would you say that's an accurate description of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've identified 4 patents that now I believe we can, and our listeners can, group our arguments collectively on analyzing a crime scene. And I believe the MAX 8 aircraft was sabotage, but I'll come to that in a minute. So the first 2 patents that I'm very interested in, taken out in 1998, and one is by the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and it's for a spoken text display system to generate TV signals. And this is beautiful from the point of view of the injection of fake news, because what you can provide to the newsreader is the words that he or she is to read, like Kate Standley from New York on 911 when she said the Salomon Brothers building has collapsed. But unseen to and that's why I use this term unwitnessed by the newsreader, you can send digital blocking notes to a demolition crew. And what happened on 911, of course, they sent the demolition notes to a little later after she'd said it, so the building didn't come until 25 minutes later. But from the point of view of, let's say, hijacking a Boeing MH370 or crashing Boeing MAX 8 aircraft, you could have a local TV station or news station generating scripts to be read to the public. This plane has collapsed, but unseen to the newsreader, they're sending digital messages or command signals, or let's call it telemetry signals, to a target aircraft or a target plane or a target car to blow it up. Over to you.
Right. And I want to be clear, we're not suggesting that that was the technique that was used, or that that necessarily was what was directly related to the crash of these Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes. The thing that I wanted to focus on during our preview here, because we're going to be having our in-depth conversation on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth in just about 25 minutes. But what we wanted to focus on, David, was this new discovery you've made that blew my mind, that kind of directly ties QinetiQ to Boeing in a way that would make them certainly, in a criminal investigation, I think you talk about a person of interest, not a suspect, but someone who is close enough to the events of the investigation that they can't not be investigated. It's not saying that they're guilty of anything, but there are a lot of things that seem to link these events together, and not the least of which is the activity from these social engineers who could well be using technology like the QinetiQ North America Social Engineering Protection Appliance. We've heard about so many other similar types of technologies. So again, when you and I engage in this type of speculative investigation in unsolved crimes, we're forming hypotheses based on facts, evidence, speculation, of course, hypotheses. We're trying to find the answer. So we've heard from other people, including Patrick Berge and others, that many of these social engineering appliances, these networks, these software tools, these individuals, this diagram shows us computers, networking equipment, mobile devices, people, the operators, and software. So it's describing a system, and there are lots of different systems that could do the same or similar things.
Well, that comes on to the second patent, which is perhaps easier to understand, and that's the Jerome Lemelson prisoner tracking patent that was introduced or assigned to Jerome Lemelson, I think, in 1998. So the same year as the BBC was assigned its patent for the spoken text. Now, the interesting thing about the prisoner tracking, it uses something I'm very familiar with, artificial intelligence or expert system or fuzzy logic algorithms to determine dwell times, either prohibited or permitted dwell times, for prisoners or parolees traveling around the world. For example, on the Conair system that was developed under the direction, I guess, of Christine Marcy Field McConnell's sister. So if we go to the Boeing MAX 8 aircraft, it would appear that if you combine those two, that is the BBC's ability to inject fake news and telemetry signals, together with the Jerome Lemelson tracking system, you could put a group of saboteurs into the Boeing production line or to the facility that we've discovered, though I think I knew it, but the importance didn't register until yesterday when you and I had this discussion. What QinetiQ is providing Boeing with is a 5-meter wind tunnel facility where it's testing the aerodynamics of the Boeing MAX 8 aircraft. And it suddenly occurred to me, if you combine prisoner tracking with testing of the Boeing MAX 8 aircraft, wouldn't it be interesting if SERCO, which is running your patent office, I'm still amazed at that, which is the world's largest air traffic controller, was given the means to hack in to the telemetry to the Boeing MAX 8 aircraft and put it in a series of maneuvers from which the pilots couldn't recover. So to find that QinetiQ has got, I think, one of 3 facilities around the world, presumably on that scale, I think it's a 5-meter wind tunnel facility, and they've been working with Boeing for the past 20 years. So I'm not accusing QinetiQ of being a criminal operation. What I am saying is, like you said, it's an entity of interest, actually of huge interest, because within that QinetiQ group, we found an individual, which we may be talking
Wait a
about
minute.
in a
Yeah,
second.
exactly. You're getting carried away
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah. Okay.
what we're trying to go for here, David, is, you know, you and I have created this show on Patreon in part because it's very difficult for us to sustain on YouTube and some of these other platforms that have been infiltrated by social engineers. So I'm not trying to put information behind a paywall, but people will take note that when you walk up to a newsstand and see the headline on a newspaper, the newsstand's not a library. The headline is intended to attract your attention. You pay $2, you read the newspaper. So you and I are going to be revealing a story today that I think is very important that people are going to want to hear. And to do that, they're going to join us on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth in just about 20 minutes. And the main focus is going to be this QinetiQ North America partnership with Boeing, the extensive studies that would have gone on in this highly sophisticated wind tunnel, and a speculative exploration into possible things that could have happened during the development of the 737 MAX 8 that may have led to the conditions that caused artificial intelligence that's designed into the aircraft to fail, and how that failure could have occurred. We'll be going into some detail in that. And we're also going to talk, David, about how the social engineers that have dogged you and I, primarily on YouTube, why they're attracted to these stories. There's certainly a huge number of YouTube channels and other websites that are putting forward information from independent investigations along the lines of the ones that you and I conduct. And it's very interesting. These persistent social engineers have been so focused on the shows that you and I do, the topics that you and I talk about, to the point of obsession. I mean, it doesn't make sense that an individual would spend so much time counteracting what you and I say, even if what we said were false. These guys don't represent SERCO, or do they? They don't represent Christine Marcy, or do they? But yet they jealously defend these entities, David, in a way that the attention they apply to us and the defense of these topics in and of themselves draw conspicuous attention to the social engineers, because why else would they be so dedicated to attempting to discredit what we say unless they were fearful that it was, what's the language of the patent, objectionable?
Yes, and I think if I can coin a phrase, their meta target is to try and protect crime scenes which have been, and I've created this word from Newspeak, the wonderful 1984 dystopian novel by George Orwell, where he introduced language where gradually the vocabulary is reduced to the point where the public no longer have the words to describe the crime. Now, I believe the meta crime or meta problem that we're facing here, if you look at these crime scenes, you find immediately the crime happens, let's say outside the Pentagon, there are people moving in, removing evidence. And I think there's a threat that goes out to the people who know what they saw, and what the party, back then it was called INGSOC, which is the English Socialist Party. That was the name given to it by George Orwell. I've got a better phrase, I think, called the Ghost Party, and we can go into that a bit later. But what the Ghost Party is about in Chicago, in New York, and Washington, and Vancouver, is where there is a crime, they want to be able to tell the witnesses what they saw, right? And if the witnesses say what they saw, I mean what the witnesses like, they're threatened, they're ridiculed, they're bankrupted, they're killed in an extreme situation, although that draws a lot of attention. But I believe now that the world, and America in particular, is facing the challenge of dealing with unwitnessed crime scenes. That is to say, it's not that there are no witnesses, there are hundreds or thousands or even millions of witnesses. But what the witnesses actually saw is not what they're allowed to say in court, even if they're allowed to get into court. Over to you.
Right. Yeah, and what it comes to, David, is essentially a battle in the court of public opinion, right? And it's remarkably similar to what's going on with the president here in the United States. The impeachment, pseudo-impeachment, let's call it, occurred yesterday. The Speaker of the House has failed to present the articles of impeachment to the Senate, which lawyers are saying indicates that the impeachment process in the House is not complete. But again, it's this issue of Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, and the Democrats have impeached Donald Trump in the court of public opinion. They have not followed the due process of law. They have not followed the constitutionally established norms for impeaching a U.S. president. They just put on a big show in Congress, put it out on the fake news, injected a lot of fake and false information, and basically gaslit everybody into thinking that what they're doing is okay. And they've effectively achieved their goal. This will have an impact on the 2020 election and people's perception of Donald Trump. Whether it'll prevent him from a second term or not remains to be seen. But isn't this what social engineers are trying to do with you and I, David, to impugn our integrity in the court of public opinion?
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe we underestimate these people at our peril, because going back to the work that we've done before, I believe they now have, I would say, up to 10 million victims of a elite racketeering crime or enterprise that was started out in Vancouver, where they can contact any of those individuals, give them an instruction, and they're going to do exactly what they're told. So some people might say, well, it won't get through the Senate. And I'm saying, if there's 10 Republican senators who have been entrapped by these people, then you know what I'm talking about, they can be contacted and they can be told, we want you to impeach President Trump, and they'll do it because of the fear. This is an organization that the average person, it's a bit like going back to J. Edgar Hoover, is handicapped by coming face to face by a conspiracy so monstrous they cannot believe it exists. Most people do not understand that there is an organization out there that is committed 100% to overthrowing the government of the United States. They failed on 9/11. They're trying again.
That's right. And the fact that this Boeing 737 MAX 8 catastrophe is having such an impact on Boeing as a company and a greater impact on the U.S. economy causes us to at least explore the suggestion that could this be a planned event, an economic warfare tactic being used against the Boeing Corporation and the United States of America? Those 737 MAX 8 crashes occurred in 2019, squarely in the middle of Donald Trump's presidency. So if there were someone who possessed the information, the knowledge, or the ability to cause those crashes, it could be a strategic attack, a covert attack on Donald Trump's presidency and the economy of the U.S.
And I think that's consistent with the movement of Boeing headquarters to Chicago, where it, I believe, became a base for this organization. Because if you control Boeing in Chicago, you control the world's largest, except it won't be much longer. And that's why I would urge Boeing people, directors, clients, etc., staff, maybe they should visit yours and my site and join our Patreon account, because I think we can take them through some deductive reasoning that will throw a completely different light on the crashes of the 737 MAX 8 aircraft.
Yeah, and we're going to be starting our sponsor exclusive show on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards and patreon.com/crowdsource-the-truth in just about 10 minutes, David, so it's very important for people to join us over there. You know, I'm getting a comment from one of our viewers who's saying that she's confused by the cryptic titles, and it's something we've been working on. I just want to give people a little explanation of what we're going for here. The title of this preview is, Did a SERCO Kinetic Conspiracy Sabotage Boeing 737 MAX 8 with a Simulation Man in the Middle attack? Well, obviously, this is too complicated of a title if it's confusing our viewers, but the concept we're going to explore is that somehow, in coordination, whether knowing or unknowing, SERCO and QinetiQ could have had the opportunity to sabotage the Boeing 737 MAX 8 by having a man-in-the-middle attack, not on the aircraft itself, but the facility that creates flight simulations during the development of the plane. And we're going to explore some truly remarkable coincidences that connect those thoughts for us. Before we go, David, I want to let everyone know they can visit your free website, which is at reversecsiscripts.com. It's a beautifully designed site, and David's got a handy link to the playlist where people can access all of the YouTube videos that we've done, which lead you right into the more comprehensive discussions on patreon.com/reversecsistoryboards, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. People can also follow David on Twitter. He is there at CSI Hawkins. You can direct message him there. And if you have questions, if you have evidence that supports or refutes things that we say, we invite you to join us and to contact us by whatever method you find convenient. And David, you know, we've been hit by a social engineering attack that's taken these previews temporarily off of the main Crowdsource the Truth YouTube channel, so people can watch us live on Crowdsource the Truth 2, and they can access Super Chat on Crowdsource the Truth 2. YouTube's just sent me a message today that memberships are now something that people can have. You can join Crowdsource the Truth 2. I'm not sure if I've activated that yet, but things are happening and evolving, and we'll have to take a look at that. But it's a social engineering attack on the main channel, and it's reduced our viewership today. So one of the most important things that people can do if they want to help spread this information and help the channels grow is to give a thumbs up and share this video in their social media networks, email it to friends, talk to your friends and family about some of these ideas over the Christmas holiday. Merry Christmas, David. I know it must be getting cold there in Canada and you're getting ready. I'll see you in less than 10 minutes on Patreon. Anything you want to say before we go?
No, I do regret the difficulty people have of grasping the stuff. It's tough for me. It's tough for them. But you know, it's not easy for the criminals because they have to sustain a very complex structure, and one mistake and the whole thing can collapse. So I think we're right on the edge of helping bring this monster down.
Yeah, and if everyone will join us on Patreon, I think they're going to be shocked with what's going to be revealed. I certainly was. This is not clickbait. This is a big deal. It's going to tie what we're talking about here to the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury. So don't miss that. We'll see everybody in just under 10 minutes on Patreon. David, thanks very much for joining me, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you, Jason.